Good morning. I am excited to do a live stream on a very, I guess, touchy topic. And so, uh, and I have a story about how this all came about. But first, let me get present. I'm playing right now with some new technologies, which is a new iPad and not my normal setting. So just having a little technological chaos at the beginning of the day. I'm KamalaDevi, and I want to say hi to my soul tribe. I've never done a live stream with like in a group so I have no idea who's watching this or if this is gonna work out, but hopefully whoever does show up will get some value because I've got a lot to say on the subject of metamores. How to love your lover's lovers. All right, so I'm KamalaDevi, and for those of you who don't know, I've been in an open marriage now for almost, 20 years. We were both open before we were together, and we have done all kinds of experimenting and exploring and pioneering in the area of sex, relationship, tantra, poly, kink. And so I want to be really practical today and just dive into some of the conversations that I've been having with my nearest and dearest. The conversation of how to, be the best lover you can, and how to love your lovers. Like what happens when you love someone and they have other lovers, and how do you relate to them? I mean, it's a really touchy subject. And so I want to share some of what we've been, learning and exploring. And I'm sharing it in the context of this is an ongoing conversation. It's totally different for different people. And I'm going to share some of the things that I've seen that have worked and some of the things that haven't worked. And I am wanting to engage. So if you have questions, feel free to do that. And I have both Facebook and Instagram, hopefully, running simultaneously. And so I just want to say hi to the, looks like I've got friends and lovers from various parts and places. Yes, someone I met in Venice, like, was it 10 years ago? 25 years ago? Oh my God, that's amazing. So is it Dario? Oh, wow. What a fun flashback. So yeah, I I welcome and celebrate your questions. And so let me give you a little context for the conversation. I currently am living just with my husband in a kind of a nuclear household. So we do have lots of other lovers around the world, nobody that we're currently living with. And so the way that we do open relationship is often with informed consent, like everybody knows everybody. And there's this new term, it's very new, like kitchen table poly, which is like, hey, come on in, let's have, dinner together. Let's, like everybody, we're family and we're around the kind of in the round table of community. And I would say that we as a philosophy really enjoy and prefer that intimate network where everybody's connected and has their own friendships with each other. And we've been cultivating that for many years. So we used to gather, as lovers and invite our lovers to invite their lovers so that everybody would get to know each other for kind of two times a month. We had this pulse and rhythm. This is pre-COVID. And during these gatherings, we would drop in, get to do icebreakers, get to know each other, and then do sometimes self-expression forums where we'd express like where there's jealousies or what's alive or what we're learning. And we'd really kind of have this mastermind of sharing, our hearts and how we our challenges and how we want to relate to each other. Now, that's a pretty conscious and invested setting. Not everybody wants to invest that much time in cultivating lovership and community and having a rhythm and having, and for some it felt like an obligation. To be honest, I've got a lot of lovers who are busy thought leaders, and they're working on their dharma and doing their work in the world, and the thought of like, ooh, I have to come and do this family process felt a lot of times like more work than they work, or ultimately there's a cost benefit for everyone, and you have to feel like, ooh, this is really enriching and rewarding. And not everybody wanted to relate to everybody. They'd rather just be like, hey, let's just have our date night and we'll see each other, and I'll trust you to talk to your other lovers. And so I want to say that although we have had that ideal, and although we used to have the capacity to get together and do that regularly, we don't now, not just because of the pandemic, but also because through the years, everyone's busy. And while that's an ideal, it is also true that some relationships are really like unique and don't always fit into the lives of our other lovers. And some of them are kind of intimate and private and want to be cultivated and kept on the side, or just when we're in town, we get a hotel room and, have our lovers retreat, and then we come back to our, life or our community. So there's lots of different ways to do it. One of the things that I'd say, as you cast a big umbrella that's on the outside of what's okay, because it's kind of like, yay, permission to do everything, design relationship your way. But what doesn't work is when it's in secrecy or private, or if we're doing something that then is draining us in a way that we come back to our community or our nesting partner more drained or in disconnect or separation with our family. Like whatever we're doing on the side is pulling us away from what we're doing with our beloveds, in our, the core, the nucleus of our, our heart and our hearth and home and, our life. So that's where we say, hey, this isn't enhancing to our previously existing partners, and it doesn't really work. Now, how do we keep it enhancing is kind of the topic that I want to talk about. Like, how do we keep kind of growing those connections and make sure that everyone's happy in the whole ecology? So recently, in preparation for the Evolve Fest, which is actually happening in December, and it's created by Rachel Rickards and Eugene, who are both, by the way, both Eugene and Rachel are Metamores. So I'm presenting, or was going to be presenting, the event changed dates, and I'm traveling to Costa Rica, and they said, okay, well, let's do a pre-recorded talk or workshop. And Rachel got the brilliant idea of, I want to talk with you and also with Jessica Fern, the author of Polysecure, and we can brainstorm, what's a really hot topic. And Jessica Fern proposed metamores, knowing, this is a touchy thing. How do we relate to our lovers, partners? Not knowing, though, the depth of challenge that I had in my life with my Metamore relationship with Rachel. So flashback 10 years ago, Rachel, myself, Michael, also at the time Tall, and Jennifer all lived in a home together. And this is during and after the reality show, Polyamory, Married, and Dating. So we were on a reality show for 2 seasons with Showtime. And that was one of the greatest growth times of my life, as well as the deepest ego confronting experience and challenge. And most of those challenges were around me sharing my love for Michael with Rachel. So Rachel and Michael were very intense, deep, soul lovers. Like, it was an immense connection that they had. And it was at a time when my partnership with Michael was sort of rocky, and we were, really focused on a lot of the, I don't want to say incompatibilities, but at the time it felt like we were not compatible. So we were having challenges, and we actually, having Rachel in a lot of ways was a kind of a glue. Like, she and I had a kind of a connection that gave nutrients that I wasn't getting from my partnership, but then ironically, so it was a medicine and it was a poison, because I was very, very challenged and jealous and insecure. Their connection was like, seemed deeper, more compatible, more, like sexier, hotter chemistry. And so at that time, that relationship was one of the biggest growth, like, schools. And so I want to share, there's a lot of things that we both came away from that, having learned. And just recently, when we were on this interview with Jessica Fern, we both acknowledged, wow, there's so much we didn't know, 10 years ago when we did this, that we know now through life has shown us, and also hindsight. And probably the biggest thing that we both are tuned into now, Jessica Fern has brought to the forefront of the poly community a more trauma-informed view of how to tune to the nervous system and to keep ourselves, like, connected to, what's our attachment, and not getting dysregulated, and how to get how to downregulate and co-regulate. And these are things that we've been practicing, through the years, as being more attuned and more sensitive to our own, nervous system's capacity. And so Rachel and I were really grateful to have her there, and we looked back and we're like, we didn't know what we were doing. We totally were overriding our nervous system. We weren't listening to the red flags. And so it was a sweet kind of like apology or reckoning on that. And, at the same time, there's a lot of practicalities that I didn't share in that interview that I want to share. And I will be doing another deeper, like a real play shop, where if you are in multiple relationships and want to learn how to, the tips and tools of really how to relate to a metamor, then for the Evolved Fist, I'm doing another workshop, and I'll put the link in, and you're welcome to join me there. But I thought, I'll share with you a little bit about that right now, because I think there's a fantasy that people think they should relate to their other lovers a certain way, or whether it's a fantasy or it's like, this is how I do it, so this is how everyone should do it, or I don't know how to do it at all. And I want to offer some examples of how that can go well and what I know doesn't work. And so I will say this, like, when you're sharing a lover, it is such an intimate, such a deep thing. Like, there is a way in which, if you love someone and you know them intimately, and you know that they have someone else on, who they're having an experience with, and it's a unique experience, because every two people create a universe that's so unique. But how do you, it's like, okay, I don't want to compare. I don't want, like, I want to be happy for them having that experience, but I need to give myself permission that there's a wounding here, or an insecurity here, or there's a jealousy here. And maybe you're not such a jealous person, but just getting that we're all kind of in a parts conflict, because something happens in love and sex that may be like, I want you all to myself. Like, all those feelings are welcome. So that it's kind of starts from like, hey, everyone's got a part of us that wants to be celebratory and compersive of a partner's and wants to see them grow and thrive and experience variety. And then there's another part of us that is in resistance to that or challenge that, and like to really kind of come whole to all the connections, to come whole to yourself, knowing that you have that parts conflict, to let your beloveds know that that's like there's two wolves within you, right? And then in the conversation with your lover's lover, that conversation might be via email. It might be that you guys have some FaceTime. It might be that you all get together, like whatever degree of relating that you choose to opt into, you always want to bring all of yourself, not just, ooh, I'm going to just be happy and put on a smiley face and pretend like it's all awesome and that I'm so compersive. Like, that's when we start to fracture. That's when we start to like betray ourselves, and then our feelings and our that other wolf can get really angry and come up and sabotage that relationship or your primary relationship, whether you do primary or not. Your lover, your connection with your lover can be sabotaged with how your whatever you're resisting and denying can come back and just like hijack your experience. So the first piece is to come whole. That's like the biggest tip. And then in regards to like how much and what to communicate with your Metamore, this is a dance. This is a dance of like, okay, well, what is going to let me be at my best? And I want to recognize that I may have an ideal of us all sitting at a kitchen table together and being a happy family, but they may or may not have that. And what do they need to be at their best? And how do I meet them in the place that works for both of us? And I can't imagine that I know that. We're not psychic. I mean, we might even be psychic, but we still need to know, to hear and confirm that. And so we want to then, explore that. And it might be like, oh, I have an ideal. Well, what's the truth of how we relate? Because we really want to be in reality with this, with this person. And so I'm proposing then that it's kind of a sharing, a vulnerable, like, here are my feelings and thoughts, and this is what I would need to be at my best. And that might be like, hey, to get to know you a little bit, or to know what your intentions are with my partner, or to know what your dates are like, or to know, what's between us directly. These are suggestions. These are guidelines of what you might be needing. And to just really be open to, well, what are their insecurities? What are their jealousies? What are their wounds or tender points? And to say, I want to be sensitive to what those are. And maybe if you don't want to know, just being like, hey, this is how I work best, which is where if I get my direct connection with my partner, and I want to know that I can trust that he's communicating, and that you guys have that handled, and that partner will let me know if there's anything that I need to know about what's happening on the other side. And is that okay with you? Because for some people it's like, ooh, that feels, oh, what a relief. It's not to work. I don't have to have a big other lover. And for other people, it's like, it's a disappointment or a frustration, or I don't know that I can trust my partner to be in the middle. So I just, I want to share the possibilities without having a deep value, without having imposing my values on you. I want to really, give permission to what that how that co-creation might look. And it's okay if it's iterative. Like, don't expect to have it all in place, or don't expect to have it like, this is how I like to do it, and this is how it must be done. And there are couples, that genuinely say, hey, we only play together. So, any Metamore relationships that we have are part of the, group, and that is ethical, non-monogamy. There's other relationships that really only play separately. And, the only thing that's not polyamory is if it's like we don't ask, don't tell, because that technically is not informed consent of everyone involved, which is, it's just kind of a semantic distinction. And don't ask, don't tell as a temporary band-aid for a really difficult situation is like, look, I don't have the bandwidth to hear the details. I need to not know. That is an acceptable agreement for the momentary process, but not a sustainable, healthy way of relating to your lover's lovers. So yeah, there's a lot more that I could say on this juicy subject, but I am curious if you have questions or experiences that you wanted to, share. And I really appreciate this morning. We've got a small group with my technology, and I want to see what responses. Dynamite Dolly acknowledges that there's so many different dynamics, and thank you. Yes. And then somebody else is celebrating my approach to life. So I've got people who appreciate the Showtime reality show, and I'm happy to be giving advice. Sometimes it's so funny. It's like less advice because all I'm saying is like, it's so unique. My ultimate advice is be yourself. Know who you are, be true to that, and like be sensitive to other people's differences and how do we co-create. I mean, it's the broadest advice, but it's like, it's the only thing that works, is us being really true to ourselves, because the more we try to make other people happy, and people please and give away our power if it's not our happiness and doesn't please us, then we go bankrupt. Really, it's such a disservice to everyone. And it happens a lot in polyamory. It's like, oh, I want to love, I have this ideal of loving, and loving looks like making everyone happy. It's like, no, actually, loving looks like being true and being free, like being, free to be like, I need to follow my soul's calling. And freedom can piss people off. All right, so now I finally have some questions. So Coldmere, hi. How do you suggest to handle jealousy from the man because of other lovers? Okay, so I will say that whether it's a man or a woman, jealousy is a really natural, jealousy itself is a broad category, but it's a really natural response. And the number one thing I say to do is just own it, is for everybody to say, hey, let's take responsibility. So a lot of people, and I had a lover for many years who said, no, I'm not jealous. It's not jealous. I'm just mad because of this. They could not face their fucking jealousy, and therefore we could not work on it. We could not get through it. Like their ongoing denial of jealousy was like a door slamming on being able to get through to love. It was very challenging. All right, so that's the step one is kind of like any addict. You just want to admit it. And then, part of that like recovery path is also like, and I need help. I need help with my jealousy. Let's get on the same team. Let's work together on this, as opposed to feeling like it's against, and I'm not going to put my jealousy off on you or need you to change your absolute behavior in order to suit me. But when you are in partnership and in community, there's a sensitivity to, oh, wow, whether it's jealousy or illness or busyness with work, my partner has so much bandwidth. How do I move in a way that's sensitive to their bandwidth? So jealousy is a whole other topic. I think that is an ongoing thing. And the answer when I say get help is there's so many resources out there. Once you own it, immerse yourself, work on it, don't deny it. That's a lifelong study. And I'm in it. I'm in the school of, jealousy is my teacher. So more on that in other platforms. I want to talk a little bit more about Metamores. And I have Dynamite Dolly again, He says, my husband and I are in a year as polyamorous couple, and it's honestly the best choice we've ever made. Yay! I could never look back. At first I wasn't sure, but I had to work through a lot of self-healing. Yeah. So I really hear that you've been healing yourself and feeling jealous from the past experiences. But once I worked through it, it became very calm and peace with myself. I love hearing those stories. I'm in one of those stories myself. My husband and I nearly divorced, after my relationship with Rachel. When it didn't work, it fell apart. Unfortunately, we had a really painful breakup and intentional space for like a year and didn't talk to each other. And then we slowly had to there was a lot of scar tissue as we slowly had to rebuild, that soul bond. And that experiment nearly ended my marriage. And Michael and I took that whole year when we weren't talking with Rachel. We took a whole year to work on our marriage with a lot of therapy. And I'm so happy to say that we got reinforced tools and tips. Like the marriage came through, and this is one of those breakthroughs after a breakdown. It came through so much stronger and so much better than what it had been prior, ever. Oh my God. So that experience created a foundation that feels indelible and unbreakable now. And the experience is very content. And the way that we approach our metamors as a result, because we have the hindsight experience of it not working with Rachel, is a lot more attunement to each other. Now, this is my closing note for everyone. So I am moving away from the emphasis on agreements. So I used to teach whole workshops on how to make poly agreements, and those are really valuable teachings and guidelines on here's best practices and let's get into agreement so it's not feeling like rules, and that's all wonderful for the logical part of the brain. But this is love, and it's an emotional experience, and there's an emotional part of us that just doesn't care about the agreements. Well, it does care about the agreements, but it has a reaction to the agreements that's not rational, not lawyerly. And what we genuinely long for is attunement. Attunement is feeling each other's nervous system, feeling each other's bandwidth, attuning to what we can handle, what's working, what's not working, really wanting to check in and course correct and feel each other. And that attunement is the healthy new way that Michael and I are approaching our new relationship with other lovers. It's great, I'm going to have this beautiful affair or relationship or deep experience that I actually, in the extramarital experience, I take it back. I do it in proportion to what my partner's nervous system can handle. And I'm tuning in and listening and feeling with them. And my kind of guideline and request with my partner is hey, I can bless and celebrate and love your lovers to the degree that you're still staying really connected to how I'm feeling. And sometimes that's jealousy, sometimes that's insecurity, and that's okay, as long as you're not disconnecting from me because I'm jealous, or you're just actually leaning in and tuning in. So our little mantra is attunement over agreements. And we like both, but attunement is really the emphasis now. So I have a couple more pieces I want to read before we wrap up here. And I see that we've got, sorry, I'm trying to read. I can't even see the questions because the devices are in the way. All right, here we go. So Erin, hi honey. Have you had a meta want to put boundaries on your interactions with a partner? It surprised me. He wanted her to wear condoms with my partner, who I've been fluid bonded with longer than he has been in the picture. Yeah, he wanted you to wear condoms. Yeah, so condom commitment and fluid bonding, you know, these are two really deep agreements, and there's a lot that comes with them. And oof, and what Erin is pointing to is that often the relationship that has seniority is often the one that has like priority around, well, this is how we've done it, so we don't want to change it for this new person. And that's an example of an assumption like that. We assume that just because you have a longer period of time that then it's better not to. And I'm just saying, like, as a best practice, we want to add lovers that are enhancing and in harmony with the current ecology of how we're being. That's a best practice. Then there's not so much change and adjustment. But the truth is sometimes bringing on a new lover means we got to slow down a bit, or we got to change something in order to accommodate this. And it also, you know, it is really generous and big. Like my partner will often like really attune to my new partners, whereas I will be like, hey, this is what, you know, is already established. You can't have a partner that comes on and changes how we're being, you know. And so I'm just giving you an example of two people that are like that handle it differently. But yeah, I mean, the condom question and fluid bonding question has been a big one for a long time, and it's one that's evolving a lot in my understanding, especially as technology improves for safety reasons. Like, I'm blown away at how advanced our medical ability is to handle, you know, HIV and with HPV back. Like, it's just like, okay, this changes the conversations. And even though I learned my sex ed back when, you know, there are fear tactics about safer sex, and I was all like everyone else kind of traumatized about it, that has really shifted for me. Okay, but that also is another big conversation. I just really appreciate the vulnerability, Erin, for you to like bring that and share it. Okay, so I'm just scrolling through, and you know, in wrapping up, I'm really appreciating, you know, all of those of you that shared that you you know, are exploring becoming lovers with your meta and how to balance that. Okay, I think that's a good one to end on, because there's dual relationship dynamics. Thank you, Erin. I love you. Okay, I want to shift topics to close on becoming relationship with your meta is like adding another layer. And dual relationship is something that I do really well. So I'll just give you an example. Obviously, with my husband, you know, I'm wife and he's husband, and we also have our parenting relationship where we're co-parents, and then we also have, you know, we own a business together, we're running that, and it's super important to get that in each of those relations there's actually power dynamics, right? So like in the business, he's senior, like he mentors me in a lot of ways, especially in finance. Like he is stronger than I am and leads me in that. In parenting, he's a stronger parent than I am. He has more involvement and I support him more. Like there's dynamics. And in, you know, like our spiritual path, because he's also like apprenticing, there's a way in which I am his mentor in that area. And so there's a lot of nuances in how we relate in different, like you could even say we're putting different hats on. Now, in the current situation, and I'm going to keep using Rachel as an example because I brought, that is what inspired this conversation, and she's got this great festival coming up. And there was a time in which it was she was my Metamore and he and she were lovers. And then there was a way in which we were opening our relating. And it's like, ooh, now there's a newness of a relationship that's tender, that doesn't have the same dynamic as, you know, my partner and her dynamic. And that tenderness, because relationships go through phases and stages. And so relating to her as a lover was one dynamic that came with a whole bunch of insecurities, and relating to her as a metamor, which is now we're talking about, being sister wives or sharing, my husband in our house where I had more power and history there. So what I'm pointing out is that in each new relationship, there's new dynamics, including power dynamics that are sensitive. So you want to say, hey, if we're going to add a type of relationship, is now we're going to become romantic or erotic, or, what is the new relationship that we're adding? Let's see to it that this meta relationship is really strong, and also we're really clear when we're relating as metamors versus as lovers. And it's not like you have to, change hats and say, now it's this or that. It's just an additional layer of awareness that it gets so much more complex. If you take on a new lover and you're not having to share your current lover, like that new lover may not be as deep and as close. So it's not as strong of a relationship in some ways, but it's also a lot freer or a lot less complicated. So the key here is to tune in and to just presence, like, wow, there's a lot of stacking here. How are we? And do we have the emotional bandwidth to handle all these dynamics? Because at times that stacking can become like, it's not like 1 + 1. It's like genuinely like 1 and then times 10. It's exponential when we add different relationships, and all of a sudden we're like, whoa, this is more than I can handle. I don't want to mess up the metamor relationship. And one of the biggest pitfalls or the biggest challenges is, how do we then exit that, right? Because we acknowledge that relationships are like coming together and exchanging medicine. And sometimes that medicine's complete. Like sometimes there's diminishing returns to that exchange, or we say, wow, that medicine's becoming poison. How do we let go of that relationship and still maintain a healthy metamor relationship? And that is really advanced, like graduate school stuff. So I'm just acknowledging and celebrating, for those of you listening, like the depth of nuance and subtleties in these metamor relationships. And that's true whether you know them and you're just feeling them in the ethers, you're feeling them psychically connected through your beloved, or whether you're deeply involved with them in triadic relationship or multi-person family intimate network. So thank you for showing up to the conversation. If this is juicing you and you want to continue, there's going to be a lot of evolutionary relationship conversations at the festival, so check that out. And I'm sending love and light until soon. Blessings.